all the other guys, and there was a lot of blues fused music. Another one was called Oh Yeah. It came out a little later. It had featured a blues called Oh Lord, Don't Let 'Em Drop That Atomic Bomb on Me. That had Roland Kirk. Once again, just freewheeling, free-form, blues-drenched gospel, and also had a third stream element. There were serious moments. He just covered the whole spectrum of music. But the main thing were they were a lot of fun to play along with. So I actually learned how to kind of improvise and swing playing along with some of these records. So in a nutshell, that was my introduction to Mingus. I had to be like 10 years old. I'll never forget that record cover. It's still great. And the record's great.
Great. It's true. You know, Mingus, Mingus was so accessible. You know, I actually came to Mingus a little bit later in a sense, because when I was a kid, I grew up in Hawaii. And, you know, besides the fact that I went to high school with President Obama, and he used to beat me at basketball pretty consistently, which is the truth.
Not everybody can say that.
Yeah, he used to use and abuse me on the basketball court. But when I was about, you know, say 12 years old, the trombonist from Louis Armstrong's quintet, or sextet, was a guy named Trummy Young. And he moved to Hawaii. And so I was able, like I remember the very first jazz solo I ever played in my life, I went over to Trummy's house. And he said, I'm going to play and I want you to blow over it. It was a D-flat blues. But, you know, I mean, to me, Trummy Young was God. You know, just incredible. I mean, you can't imagine being 12 years old and here's this, like, living legend of jazz. And so the only thing was, when I was 12, I had never seen, it was the only jazz group I'd ever seen was Trummy Young's quartet. So I thought all jazz ensemble, or jazz bands were led by trombone players. I didn't know, because that was the only one I'd ever seen. So then I thought, you know, I was 12 years old. I said, I want to be a jazz trombone player. So, you know, that was my introduction to jazz. And I had a very similar situation, you know, to Randy, that I was, you know, a little bit different in the sense that I got a job at a record store. And instead of getting paid money, like on payday, a lot of times my grandmother would come and stay at our house for 6 months at a time. And I would go to the record store, and I was like a sophomore, junior in high school. And instead of getting money, I would just come home with records. And my grandmother would say, you're working like 20 hours a week, and all you do is coming home with records. And I say, yeah, but that's great. I'm making a lot more, you know, the value of the records, because he was giving me like half price on the records, you know. And I would come home with different records. Usually, at first, it was all trombone records. You know, J.J. Johnson, the eminent J.J. Johnson. As I grew a little bit older into high school, the guy who became, besides Trummy Young, my hero was John Coltrane. And then the only guy that I ever heard playing in Coltrane's quintet in the 60s was Eric Dolphy. So then I was like, well, Eric Dolphy's it, you know. And then Mingus has this record, Mingus Presents Mingus, with Eric Dolphy and Ted Curson. And I don't know if you guys know that record. You guys know Mingus Presents Mingus? It's one of the first, I don't know, it might not be the first, but it's one of the first where Fables of Fabulous has the actual lyrics. Because it was recorded in the studio. Now, see, I didn't know, because Mingus gets on the mic and he goes, okay, we don't want any glasses, you know, no cash registers, no nothing. And he was just faking it in the studio, because he was really in the studio. But they recorded, and they did the original Fables of Fabulous with Eric Dolphy. And so that was something, for example, that just caught my imagination. And then later, you know, of course, then I started doing what Randy did. I bought all the records like Mingus Aum and Blues and Roots. And Jimmy Knepper, you know, was one of my favorites. You know, and I really loved Jimmy Knepper's playing, although it didn't really reflect on my style as much, because I really was, you know, a disciple of J.J. and Curtis and Slide Hampton and people like Frank Rosalino and Carl Fontana, as well as Jimmy Knepper. Because then, as I grew older and started getting into, you know, doing these gigs, of course, Knepper's sound was huge. You know, a huge part of Mingus' sound. The interesting factor, too, was that Mingus was a trombone player. I don't know if you guys know that. Mingus played trombone, and Sue probably knows the exact year that he changed. Was he about 12 years old?